What that moment did for me was really taught me that while the metrics are important for a lot of different purposes, they don't tell the story. I would say I wish that they had looked dumbfounded, because that would have been an emotion that I could track. It is not just about experience feedback. It's not about the look back data. It's not about, hey, customers said these things about our surveys. What tells the story is what's driving the metrics. And what tells the story is.
My name is Jochem van Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company, because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. So my guest today is Trish Wethman. She is the former Chief Customer Officer at Best Egg. And Trish has spent her career driving meaningful, measurable change, from creating customer-centric strategies to basically unlock growth, drive innovation, but more importantly, improve business performance through CX. She is widely known for building a high-performing team, multiple teams, but as the CCO, she developed and rallied the company around a single customer experience vision. And we're going to talk about that today. She climbed the ranks through building voice of the customer and insight programs to ultimately transform the culture to be truly renowned for customer centricity. So let's dig into building high-performing customer experience functions, but we will also cover the future of the function in the world of AI and what it truly means to having an agile experience today. Trish, I am so delighted to have you here. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and ready to dig into all of these fun topics.
Yeah, and we will. And I wanted to start with a little story that you told me when we were doing an intro for this podcast. And it's so relatable for many people in customer experience design, building leverage with the business. When they finally get a meeting with the CEO and they go in and they are sharing all the great things that they're working on. And you told me one where you were well prepared. Everything went fine, but it didn't turn out exactly the way you wanted. So, or maybe I should say, went totally wrong. Do you want to share that story so we can start the podcast with that one?
Yeah, I would love to. I love to tell failing forward stories, because that's what innovation is all about. And so, yeah, it was shortly after my tenure as Chief Customer Officer in my recent role. And I was really, for the first time, presenting to our CEO and to our broader leadership team, and was very excited to get in front of that team with all of the different metrics that my team had collected, NPS and CSAT, things that we learned about customer friction and pain points, and just have a chance to really advocate for the customer in that meeting. And after I spent probably about 15 minutes going through all of that data, the response was a resounding, "What does this mean? I don't really understand what these numbers mean. I don't understand where we've started. I don't understand where we want to go. I don't understand what it means to the business. The business leaders don't understand what it means to them. So I need you to now translate all of this into a way that makes sense for business leaders." And it was a great reminder that, the job is not about sitting and pulling together decks of data and talking about things that are really important to your small team in their bubble. But it's about connecting the dots for leaders around what we're learning and how it needs to be driving the business and our transformation efforts differently and better than we have in the past. And what that moment did for me was really taught me that while the metrics are important for a lot of different purposes, they don't tell the story. What tells the story is what's driving the metrics. And what tells the story is what the business needs to do with what we're learning to make impactful change for customers that's going to change those numbers. And so it was a great reminder, still, not early in my career, but later in my career, that the storytelling that you do has to be driven by action. And you can't just be sharing a lot of numbers that don't have context to the stakeholders that don't really understand CX the way that you do.
So basically what you're saying is that, and this is what many experience design or customer experience leaders find, is that their organizations are backward looking, finding the numbers and the insights and then reporting back on them. But what you're actually saying is, like, if you don't bring a forward looking perspective to, and then what, and how should we think about these data in the context of what we are trying to achieve as a business, you will get again and again those leaders to look at you with dumbfounded eyes and say, that's interesting, but what do we do with this?
I would say I wish that they had looked dumbfounded, because that would have been an emotion that I could track. I mean, it was more kind of unknowing what to do with the information, confusion, which is definitely not what you want at the leadership level. And so it all comes down to, we know what we know, and now how do we take it and move forward with it? So to your point, it's about forward looking, and hopefully not just cleaning up bad experiences, but also creating new ones that are, interesting and engaging for your customers.
So with that experience in your pocket, what have you done differently from that point on? And how can leaders in a position that are advocating for the customer do a better job and not fail in those strategic decision-making meetings, or even in those C-suite conversations? Like, how should they do things differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, oftentimes there's a lot that you have to understand about the business that you're in, and what's important to the business and what's important to those leaders. And also, what are they trying to achieve in this moment? Are we really trying to fix something that's broken now? Or are we trying to create a broader vision for the future? And how do all of the different people in the room need to translate what's being told to them? So I think it's a couple things. I think it's getting to know the leaders in your organization in the areas that they're leading, and what the individual metrics and individual objectives are for those teams. And then ensuring that your team is not, and by your team, I mean the customer experience team, the insights team, sometimes the designers, the UX folks, making sure that they're not sitting off in a corner of the business throwing things over the wall. And I think, oftentimes when I look back over teams that I've built, if I could go back and do it differently, the one thing that I would want to do is have more integration with the business. And it's something that I was able to solve for in my most recent role. Because it's great that you have this attention and focus on your customers, and you have this small group of people that really know the customer well. But it is the job of the CCO, the CXO, the head of insights, the leader that is really creating that connective tissue between the business and the customer, to say, not only here's what's happening with our customers, but here's how that creates meaningful action for the business. And so the more that you can get your team well-versed in not just experience and expertise with the customer, but also with the different parts of the business that you serve, the better off you're going to be. So that requires curiosity, it requires empathy, but it also requires the ability to go out and learn different parts of the business that may not be native to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis as a CX professional.
So let's pull that thread a bit. So how have you solved for that in your recent role? So what does that mean in practice? Like, give me a few examples of like actual ways of working, strategies, other parts of the function that you created. Like, how have you solved for actually getting the customer experience function to understand the business, and the business to also appreciate their impact to it?
Absolutely. I think that there were two key things that I've been involved in and driven most recently that really mattered. The first was creating a customer experience vision for the organization, and really helping to create a picture of, we know what our organizational purpose is. How does that then translate into how we want to show up for customers every day, not just in servicing, but across the life cycle of the customer? And I'm sure we'll get into journey, and this is where journey plays a big role. understanding that life cycle of the customer, but ensuring that you have defined as an organization what you want that customer experience to look and feel like. And there's different ways to do that. And I can come back and talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The other thing that's really important and that I think we were very successful with doing in my most recent company was creating a different way for the customer experience team to interact with the business. Having known that we had missed the mark a little bit on, just presenting data that didn't have action, we started to really work as a team to figure out, okay, how do we connect these dots? How do we make it clear to them what needs to happen? And how do we also play a role in getting that work prioritized with our product teams, with our marketing team, with our operations team? And so we brainstormed and talked about different ways to do that. And ultimately, we designed a role that embedded the customer experience partner within different parts of the business. And we called it an insights business partner. And for us, that role was really a game changer because it started to change the complexion of the customer experience team. We weren't now just the customer folks, but we were the people that were actively engaging with partners in the lines of business, in product, in marketing, in those other areas, and driving action from what we were learning and weighing in on decisions that were being made as part of smaller leadership teams across those areas, playing a really well-defined role of business partner that's representing the customer. A lot of organizations have this concept in HR. They have HR business partners, and HR business partners are focusing on understanding the different parts of the business that they're serving so that they can improve the employee life cycle through how they recruit, how they retain talent, how they do performance management. And it was translating what that looked like into what does it mean from an insights perspective to really be supporting your business in a meaningful way. It also meant for us rethinking how we measured customer success. NPS, CSAT, we could probably have a separate podcast about the controversy and different feelings around some of those metrics. I still find them very valuable for certain reasons. But what was more valuable to the business that we were running was to look at things like acquisition and conversion and the things that they were driving across business teams. And then saying, how do we align what we're learning about our customers to help ensure that they have what they need to drive those metrics? And so it became more about aligning our work to the business outcomes, but ensuring that we were advocating for the customer in that process. But we were really thinking about it from the perspective of, as a business owner, what information do I need from the insights team? What do I need to understand better and learn about our customers differently? So, to sum it up, it's having that experience vision that entire group of insights business partners and business leaders can true back to. But it's also having a role that is deeply embedded in the decision-making and prioritization of the work across those different teams. And so that they can be informing from the perspective of the customer, what is important from their perspective.
How do you make a CX vision actually stick? Because so many times, the company has strategy and vision, a couple of those pillars that we all tie our work against. And then we come with the CX vision and it's we're going to deliver the best customer service, right? And it's that's not a vision. It's not even a strategy. It's everyone wants to do this. So right. What makes a CX vision stick, especially with business leaders? What have you found to work?
It's a great question. And I think ultimately it comes down to, and this might sound trite, but it comes down to having every single person in a leadership role across these different functions involved in and having skin in that process. Because accountability at the back end of creating a CX vision is very challenging if you don't have people involved at the front end deciding and in creating input into that process. And so I think one of the ways that we've been able to make it stick is by making it an incredibly collaborative process. This isn't, if you create a CX vision, again, off in a corner with a few people that are, consider themselves customer experts, it will definitely reflect what's important to the customer, but it doesn't necessarily consider the strategy that these business leaders are trying to incorporate into the decisions that they're making, or the organizational purpose. It'll only think about what's important to the customer, and that has to be married with these other things. So as we went through this process, and as I've done it in different organizations, it is identifying who are those key stakeholders that are going to actually bring this thing to life. And it is some variation in most organizations of marketing, operations, technology. And in our case, in a financial services organization, it included people, from groups like credit and finance, and from our most senior leadership, and getting those people to have tough conversations about when a customer talks about us, what do we want them to say, starting from that place, and having those debates and having those dialogues across a group of folks that aren't necessarily thinking about the customer every single day. But this kind of forces them to keep customer top of mind as they're going through that process. And so that collaborative aspect of the work is number one thing that you need to do to make it stick. Because when people feel like they've had some skin in that process, that they have shown up and participated, it isn't now just about work that one team did. It's about something we've all agreed to collectively. I think
Okay,
the
so
next.
we got the stakeholders, right? And we bring them together. This sounds wonderful. We do a collaborative process and we all rally around this. But the other thing that you said that I think is fascinating to dig into a little bit is say like, okay, and then we tied our work to the business outcomes they are driving, right? Whether it's acquisition or pick your big metric, like, and that's pretty hard to do, especially like in a financial services company like Pastec. That's extremely big, extremely complicated. There's so many people tying their work back to the bigger business outcome. So walk me through, like, once you align on here's the vision that we all believe from the different functions together collectively is the right approach. Like, how do you start breaking that down and say you are driving acquisition, or pick whatever metric you want? And how are we going to tie the customer experience work, the insights, back to those KPIs and goals that we're setting out to do? Like, what is the secret sauce there?
Well, I mean, if I had the secret sauce, I probably wouldn't need to be working anymore, because this is a challenge across, any business I've been a part of and many others. I'm sure you talk to folks all the time. This gets down to really proving the ROI of CX, and it's incredibly challenging. I think the way that we approached it, and I don't know if it's the secret sauce, but it's what started to work for me and started to move the needle for me. It's not, I think it's important to understand too, because some critics may say, well, then you're only thinking about the business. You're not thinking about the customer. And it really is kind of a merging of these two things. Like, the business has outcomes that it wants to achieve. I deeply believe, as a CX leader, that in order to achieve those things, they have to deeply understand the customer that they're serving. And so it starts many steps back with a team that is creating a picture for the organization of who exactly is our customer, who's the person that we're serving, what's their hierarchy of needs, what are their priorities, why do they want to work with us in the first place. So this is well before you have teams together building. This is really understanding, like, who is the customer that this organization is serving. Once you know who that person is, and then you will also do segmentation within those customers, partnering with folks like marketing. Then it is ensuring that the metrics that the organization has decided are important actually align to what we understand about that customer, and are going to drive the outcomes that the business wants. So it's very circular. It's very revisiting and understanding the customer that we're serving, and then ensuring that the business is making decisions that reflect what is important to that customer. And then from there, I think once everyone is on the same page with, look, this is the person, this is the customer that we need to be thinking about, and it's often representing a broad population of folks. Then the conversations, it's not always easy to, as an insights business partner, convince the business of something, but it is partnering with them. It is looking at all of the different data that we have available to us. It is not just about experience feedback. It's not, we talked earlier about the look back data. It's not about, hey, customers said these things about our surveys. It's about marrying that with operational data that we have today, behavioral data. We know what they're doing and how they're behaving on our website or in our funnel. and making decisions based not just on one swath of data, but on the combination of all these different pieces of data. And again, this is where it gets into taking that data and turning it into effective journey mapping that talks about the customer's experience throughout the entire life cycle with our organization. And it also speaks to why AI is going to become such a valuable tool in pulling all of this information together.
All right, let's do unravel that. Well, let's start with customer lifecycle or customer journeys. So, am I seeing like big end-to-end customer lifecycle? We all got it. Here's the outcomes we want to drive. Here's the friction that we're seeing, and now the business is in a great, happy place because everyone can align against that thing. Or is it more of, okay, now we have a starting point, and this is how we went to work? Like, what is the step from like having those clear KPIs for what matters right now, and then looking at how we're going to enable and drive action from that? Like, where does the journey play a role in turning that into reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the traditional journey that a customer takes from awareness to acquisition and conversion, like all of the things that we think about as business owners. But and so oftentimes what I've seen happen is people confusing a process map with a journey map, and or creating a customer journey map only through the lens of how the business views the customer's journey. So it's starting from a very high understanding of how your customer is engaging. But in my experience, there are very few businesses that have one journey and everything feeds neatly into that journey. There are micro journeys across each part of that higher level customer journey through something like financial services. And so it is understanding at a high level, what does it look like, how they engage with us? And then it is prioritizing across all of those different pieces of the life cycle. What are the priority journeys from a customer perspective? And you can start to do that with the data that you have. You can start to do that by having conversations with your customers. And again, it gets back to combining operational and behavioral and experience data together to build those journeys. Until you've done that and then overlaid that with, hey, what does this look like internally? What tools are they engaging with along the way? Or what employees are a part of these different processes for the customer? It's not until you've really done that work on both sides that you can start to say, based on what we know, this is how we action things across all of these journeys. And it is also not something that you do one time, as I'm sure you know, and then you put it on a wall and leave it hanging there. Every organization has journeys that are constantly evolving, either through growth or innovation. New features are added, new customer problems need to be solved. And so it has to become a living process, and you are constantly revisiting it, and you're also constantly getting new data to inform it. And it is only then, when you have that full picture, that I think you can truly take what you're learning day to day and apply that to the journey and say, here's what we need to action and prioritize.
How do you think about ownership? Like, should someone own the end-to-end? Is it the CEO that should own it? Is it the CCO? How do you think about owning micro journeys? Do they sit in different teams? Like, what's your way of thinking about owning, quote unquote, different parts of the experience?
Yeah, it's so challenging because there is not, as I'm sure you've heard before, there's really no standard definition for CCO in a lot of organizations. A chief customer officer can own insights and research. They can own pieces of marketing. They can own digital. And so it's not always consistently defined across organizations. What I think has been most effective as a chief customer officer, I was really responsible for the holistic experience of the customer. So at that highest level, we know this is how the customer is engaging with us. And these are the key moments for the customer across our journey. I believe that micro journeys within each of those pieces are owned by specific stakeholders within the business. But it's rare that you have functional heads or even GMs thinking holistically. They're often thinking about, we love the word silos, they're often thinking about their silo. So having that person, in my case, the chief customer officer, who is responsible for thinking about the customer's journey across all of these different parts of the business, And then having the micro journeys be owned by the folks that it makes sense to own. For example, if it's a communications journey, it might be marketing. If it's a servicing journey, it might be operations. And having them own those pieces. But this is where the CX vision also helps. You're trying to create a consistent experience across all of these journeys. Although not every journey is the same, the attributes that you want to put forth to the customer that they would describe the experience as need to be consistent across all those different areas of the business. One way that we started to work on creating more uniformity in my prior role was by really engaging our product managers and looking for ways to operationalize the CX principles through the tools that they were using, through weekly business reviews, to ensure that folks are thinking about it and talking about it the same way, even in areas where we have pods that are very focused on specific things.
Wow, weekly business reviews with the product managers and the inside business partners all together. If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation.
And often with marketing and technology and, the folks that are really the ones driving the action and, more importantly, prioritizing the work that's getting done.
Well, what happens in those? Are we all looking at a couple of micro journeys, or are we pitching to the GM saying, like, here's how it will impact your P&L? Like, what are those weekly business reviews about? Like, how does that go?
I think the pitching to the GMs probably different meetings. These were typically very much working meetings where you're thinking about, we have these specific things that we know are on the docket. And we have to figure out what's going to get done first, second, third, and fourth. And those conversations become insights, what's most important to the customer, marketing, what's most important from your perspective. And then it's really using that time to sort of battle out, hey, how are we going to make these decisions? What's going to inform these decisions? And so it's very much the doers in your organization. Not to say the GMs aren't doers, but they're often thinking maybe 1 or 2 quarters out. And these are the folks that are really in the weeds. And again, going back to the insights business partner, you want those folks in the weeds in those conversations, because that is where they really get to play that advocate role. They're not just delivering insights. Now they're saying, look, we know these things about the customer, and this is why it's important. And this is the data that we have to back up that decision. Of course, usually everyone's coming with the data. And so you're fighting and trying to figure out how to get things done that way. But it is really where the doers are then taking what we've learned and turning it into action.
So was the weekly business review something that you created, or was that already there and you just slotted insights into the marketing and product mix?
No, it was the latter. Yeah, no, I cannot take any credit for this. This was something that was happening within our product organization. And in some cases, the insights team sort of pushed their way into. And so it was, again, another forum. And what I would find with our insights business partners is we were representing across a number of different leadership teams. The weekly business review would be an example of one that's very action oriented, but those folks also needed to be involved in strategic conversations and road mapping conversations and working with the GMs, from a different lens of saying, hey, here's what we know about customers, what we've learned recently more broadly. And I want you to think about this in terms of your product roadmap. So it was really finding the right teams to become a part of and to work closely with. But the way that we organized that was having all of those folks report back into the chief customer officer, because at the end of the day, we did not want to lose the fact that number one job was to be an advocate for the customer.
All right. Before we segue into AI, I want to dig into the other spicy topic you mentioned earlier, proving the ROI of customer experience. Maybe we should start with an example, like from pick any project, pick any initiative, pick any part of your strategy that is an example of a clear business case where there was proven return on investment for meaningful impact that was actually coming from the customer experience or the customer insights. Can you give an example of what that might look like for people listening that are also asked to prove the ROI of customer experience and sometimes struggle?
Sure. So, it's interesting because oftentimes insights is helping directionally to make decisions, but they aren't necessarily driving like a directly revenue impacting decision. But we often found working with our teams like marketing and operations on very specific decisions that they had to make just by utilizing some research that we had done or by them coming to us and saying, hey, we're really trying to determine, marketing as an example, which of these types of communication resonates more with a customer. We can, kind of test it in production, but we'd love to get a sense of that beforehand. And so doing very simple tests with our teams, we had an online community of customers that we utilized. Just being able to go out and quickly do some research with actual customers that we could turn around in 24 hours, getting back to marketing and saying, this is what we learned. And then having marketing come back and say, hey, we saw this percentage of lift because of the assistance that you gave us with that. Those were the examples of like truly, like this is something where you can say the research helped drive this decision, which drove this percentage of lift. I would say those examples are, usually more tactical. And, they're not always like in your back pocket. Now, as a CX leader, you have to keep a large assortment of those examples in your back pocket. But another example could be, around work we would do with our servicing team to test and learn. I would also say when we were working on some innovation projects, we were able to do real-time research with customers, testing very new concepts that we were able to then turn around and say, look, this concept gave us, in one case, it was a 30% lift on conversion. And the way that we know that is directly tied back to, the fact that we tested and learned with customers and they told us that this was something that was going to resonate with them. And then we implemented that and tested it in production. So those examples are great to have, but also more broadly, the insights teams that I've worked with are also, helping make those directional decisions that are harder to tie back to a very specific bottom line. But ultimately, de-risking decisions, it is a very important and critical part of the process for GMs and for folks that are road mapping or our technology team. Creating an opportunity for them to de-risk their decision making was something that ultimately would save, on the bottom line.
Right. And one of the other areas where I'm seeing a big ROI for modern customer experience teams is in bridging or uniting or connecting the silos, where there's a lot of waste and a lot of like, let's figure it out in this part of the business and we don't care about what the rest is thinking. So if you can bridge those, there's big gains to be made when we all are looking at the customer the same way, when we all understand the journey the same way, when we all understand the data or the outcomes that we're rallying against the same way, which is removing a lot of the inefficiencies, a lot of the meetings, the unnecessary time it takes to get something in the hands of customers. Was that a priority for you as well, like increasing the alignment between the silos and making sure that decisions just happen faster and basically you're just creating more opportunities for keeping the customer, creating revenue?
Yeah, I think it comes down to creating clarity for the organization. And that is something that, it's people talk a lot about creating clarity and often they think it's communication. But, having a clear vision for your organization that you are putting forth that includes things like a CX vision or your CX principles and includes a roadmap that says this is how we want to serve our particular customer and this is where we want to get to in 3 years or 5 years. That is, to your earlier point, it is incredibly clarifying for teams that are trying to work together, and it gives them something to true back to. Because again, even the best organizations have those silos, and even the best organizations run into situations where goals are not aligned across the business. I know it sounds shocking, but it happens more often than I think many of us would like to admit. And so having the CX strategy be a unifying factor for the organization that, can be a reminder across all these folks. Like, look, ultimately what we do have in common is the customer that we're serving. And so that brings us back to what's the best thing to do for the customer right now. It does eliminate a lot of noise, or it can eliminate a lot of noise.
What were some of the principles that you found to be the most sticky ones when people outside of customer experience were actually referring to them, for instance? Like, can you give examples of CX principles that you've implemented and that stood the test of time?
Yeah, I think that there's one, and it sounds very like kind of duh, but for us, it was really, it was deeply rooted in a lot of the research that we had done. So again, in the financial services company where I worked, we, obviously offered a lot of different payment options for customers. And payment programs when customers were struggling, and different ways to pay. Could you pay with a credit card? Can I align my payments with when I get paid as opposed to having it come out once a month? And so, going back and doing the research and the legwork, one of the things that just became clear to us for our customers was that flexibility was the top priority. And as we had conversations about CX principles, it became apparent across the organization that flexibility was something that really resonated, not just with customers, but also internally. And it was something that was easily translated across different parts of the business. Well, flexibility means this in marketing, it means this from a product perspective or a payments perspective, it means this with servicing. And so that was one that I think it feels like, well, everybody wants flexibility, but we were able to actually root it very deeply in what our specific type of customer was telling us. My life requires that I have flexibility in how I handle my finances. And it's a value to me if I'm working with a financial services organization that provides that flexibility. And, we would not just put it out there and not revisit it. We would go and have conversations with customers. I mentioned our online customer community previously, and that was a place where we would get customers on the phone with executives and have them have conversations in real time with the executives on the phone, and ask them, can you talk to us a little bit about why this is important to you or what your priorities are? And so we were constantly kind of making sure and testing with customers, like, are these things still resonating?
Nice. And it's also a great way for leaders to understand what the principle means in practice, right? If they hear it from the
Exactly.
customer. Right. So let's go to the spicy topic. Maybe the simple question is like, how is AI or how can AI fundamentally reshape the way customer experience is practiced?
Yeah. So I was having a conversation recently with somebody, and I made a comment that AI has changed customer experience more in the past year than I've seen, like, all things impact customer experience over the past 5 to 10 years. It's similar to what we saw with COVID. Behaviors change so quickly, so fundamentally in a very quick amount of time. I think that customer experience is not just something that should be practiced in theory. And oftentimes in teams, particularly like in mid-sized organizations, but I've also seen this in larger ones, where the teams are really focused solely on like collecting the data and pulling together, and I have worked with fantastic CX analysts that are really good at what they do, and pulling together data from our operations team and our credit team and like pulling it together and telling a story with the organization. And, unfortunately, then there's another part of the job that is actioning the work, and that gets short shrift because so much of the time is spent pulling it together and like creating the visual. And what I've seen happening incredibly rapidly over the past couple of years is that piece of the work is being automated by AI in really good ways. And so my hope is that as that continues, we're going to see a real shift in the CX space, customer experience space, from spending all of the time doing that legwork to doing a different kind of legwork, which is getting out into the business and really driving the action and saying, like, look, I have a report here that I was able to pull together in an hour as opposed to a week. that is now telling me that we need to prioritize these things, and this is why. And so it's going to shift where the work is happening, I think, but it's not going to de-emphasize that the work has to happen. We need to understand all of that work that AI can pull together very quickly. But I want those CX folks now to be in the conversations, driving the change as opposed to doing the legwork, if that makes sense.
Can AI do the entire inside business partner function?
I'm going to say no. Some folks may push back, but I think in my experience, at the end of the day, there is still fundamentally critical relationships that have to be built with different parts of the business. AI can't go out and facilitate those conversations, at least not yet. You may tell me I'm wrong. It can't really understand all of these different priorities from the business owners and facilitate the conversation that gets them to a place where they understand why certain decisions have to be made that maybe aren't in the best interest of their particular silo. And that's where I see CX going. I think it's going to become a more consultative partnership, and it's going to require a different set of skill sets that are going to be more about the relationship. It's very similar, I think, to what we're seeing in the agent space. Today, there is a lot of value, and customers do really like talking to an agent that can help them solve a problem. But what I think is going to become interesting as AI starts to replace those agent interactions that are a little bit less human critical, I need to download a statement, I need to change my due date, and allows them to move into more value add conversations. A customer, from my experience, customers may not want to self-serve a payment program that they need to be on. They might want to have some empathy and talk to somebody about that. And now the agents are going to have more time to do that. In the same way, your customer experience experts are going to be able to actually go out and help make the decisions and drive the action, as opposed to doing a lot of the data analysis, which can be automated now and better every single day in terms of what we're seeing.
So what would the perfect AI, based on the knowledge we have today, an AI first experience operating model, how would that look like? Say you get to build it from scratch, you're the new CCO of this company, and you get to build it, but it has to be AI. Like everything you can do with AI must be AI. Like how would you approach it? Like where would you still put humans? Like what are the parts of the roles that you would actually like get done by agents and coordinate a couple of agents together? Like how would you change the way you would approach the CCO role today versus like 5 years ago?
Well, I still think it's about building the relationship. So we'll set that aside because the CCO has to be the one that's out there playing the role of connective tissue across the organization. But, and I think this will be something that will probably make you happy to hear. There are activities that are really critical to understanding your experience, like journey mapping today, that are incredibly time and resource intensive in doing it the traditional way. I am someone that, was in those rooms 5-10 years ago, building the huge map across the wall and pulling in people to answer different questions and pulling in customers to have those conversations. And so for me, having an AI tool that is going to be able to automate a lot of that work is going to be a game changer, because that is the time it takes to do that well with the amount of data that we have at our fingertips now. Hopefully, if you have your data organized well, and that's a different story, but if you are able to pull together all of that data that previously you had to get by bringing people into the room, and now you're able to do it through an AI tool that can create that journey for you, in what would have maybe taken 2 weeks before, now you could do in less than an hour. In my mind, that is going to be something that changes how CCOs spend their time and how the people that work for them spend their time. It's going to be more about being able to create that broader vision for the organization, align with strategy, make sure that your GMs understand the person that they're serving, and then utilizing the AI component to help create that visualization. I would say, in customer experience, we've been a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of using AI and ML. I've been using text analytics now since, for years. And that's not, the same thing as what we're doing with generative AI, but we were the first ones that were really automating some of the key parts of our workflows and saying, like, we're taking all of these transcripts and we're taking all of this survey feedback and we're doing text analytics on it. We've been doing it with voice for a while. So we are very innovation forward and thinking about how we create value through our teams and through the time where we're spending. And so I think AI for CX is a very natural progression because it's something that we've already been comfortable with, through our earlier experiences with some of those tools that do text analytics and voice analytics. But for me, it will be doing a lot of the legwork around that journey, pulling together a lot of data that has previously been highly manual to do, and really creating a baseline right out of the gate that would have maybe taken months for a new CCO in the old world.
Okay, wonderful. Like, I'm with you. So then all the teams, all the people that are typically necessary to pull our, we don't need them anymore. You need less of them. You would build a smaller, more effective team. Walk me through, like, what will be the actual necessity of the roles to tie the business outcomes back to the journey, to the insights, like coordinating in the business. Probably reporting is not necessary anymore. That will be AI driven, and maybe someone still needs to like vet that, but it's going to be way less human involvement. So do we need less people? Like, should people that have not adapted to the new reality be scared for their jobs? Like, what is your take on that?
Well, I mean, everything that you're seeing about AI right now, I think everyone is going to be rethinking what their jobs look like and where we can really add value. For customer experience teams, yeah, I do think that you may see a shifting in responsibilities and a shifting in purpose for that role. And that might mean that folks previously that started in an organization as a CX analyst, like, may not have an opportunity like that anymore. And, that is a shame because there is a lot of learning that happens for folks that are early in their journey. But what excites me about it, again, is that, it really starts to allow these folks to become the face of the customer in the organization. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier. It has this unifying factor. Like, the CX team, in my experience across multiple industries that I've been in, has always played this role of being the unifier because they are the ones that are the standard bearers for who the customer is, what's important to the customer, and how we're translating that into action. And so I think it's going to require a shift in skill set, again, to a more consultative, more curious, more willing to kind of get in the weeds with parts of the business that are outside of maybe their expertise, and starting to play that role of aligner. Chief alignment officer is probably what the chief customer officer role will become down the line, because it's, the person that knows the strategy, the person that knows what the business needs to do, and the person that knows what's important to the customer, and aligning all of those things through CX principles or a CX vision, and ensuring that all of that drives the business outcomes that the business is looking for. That's all about creating alignment across those different areas of the business. And so it may not be for everyone going forward. It may not be a role that people are interested in. I think it is going to require a different set of skill sets, but I don't think that the need for teams that are focused on this is going to go away. I think it's going to become more important than ever, because we are now going to have so much data telling us what customers want and telling us what the right decisions are. We're going to need more people driving that action and making things happen and innovating. And that is also another place where I think these folks can shift to, is creating innovative solutions for an organization. Oftentimes orgs have a strong desire to innovate for their customers, but they don't have the manpower. And so being able to shift some of those resources to areas of like new product development and research, that's going to be an amazing evolution for this role that is already grounded in that human-centered design approach to understanding what's important to the customer.
What have you seen on AI research specifically? Can AI replace the person doing the interview, the person talking to a customer to really get to the data? Should we be rethinking surveys and the way we collect data by making everything like avatar AI based, where it's literally AI talking to you, calling you, maybe even like video calling you? Or what have you seen that works? Or are you skeptical? Like, what's your take on where we are today?
I don't think skeptical necessarily, but I do think that there are going to be some customers, some folks that you need to learn from that are going to be resistant to doing an interview with I will give you an example in some call listening that we've done in the past and in translating that, through voice analytics and text analytics. We had seen this trend of the word robot coming up again and again. And what we started to dig into was, as customers were engaging in chat, they were asking, am I talking to a robot? And there is a little bit of a resistance to that. And I think people are still, there's a lot of change management that's going to happen, not just for organizations that are implementing AI, but for customers that are interacting with it. And organizations are going to have to be thoughtful about how we roll out AI solutions. And it is going to come back to understanding who your customer is and what will fly with them and what won't. It's going to be different across industries and companies. I think that there will be a purpose for it. I personally would love to see, a less of a dependence on surveys, and being able to scale. For example, a customer answers a survey question and it's finite right now. I've seen some AI that can then do probing questions and follow up that you wouldn't normally get through a static survey. So for me, it's about using AI creatively to go deeper, and understanding where it can, and I hate to say the phrase replace humans, but where it can create better data for us so that the humans can spend their time, again, actioning that data or creating new solutions. I don't know if I went too roundabout on that, but I think there's a place for it. And I think, we just have to be really deliberate and planful about, again, not just how we're implementing it internally, but how it's landing on customers.
I have this running theory in my mind where it's almost like CX engineering will be where this is going. You need a couple of very smart people that are building the agentic workflows to understand, like, okay, what are the data we need? How are we using the journey to basically route and connect with the different business functions to get them the right information to, I like what you said earlier, de-risk their decisions, basically.
Yeah.
But that system needs to be built. And in a complex environment, like an enterprise financial services company, for instance, with tens of thousands of employees today, with many different products and services, with many different customer personas, like, it's very messy and it's really, really hard to do. So building those systems are going to be foundational. And then you need a couple of people to operate it. And then the question is, what else do you need around that to help people make decisions and act on them? Like, maybe the function will be dissolved into the other silos that already exist.
It could
or maybe
be.
there will be a central coordination layer. The judge is out on this, but like, this is where my mind goes when I'm thinking about CX engineering and CX operations, was actually going to be the future of where AI can take us.
And I think too, like, I agree with what you said, that it can't, you're going to need humans to build it. You're also going to need humans, I think, to quality check it and refine it over time. And maybe not permanently, but I think, in the interim, while we are testing and learning, you are still going to need those people that have expertise getting in there and making sure that what we're seeing is kind of lining up with what we know, making sense, that we're not putting information out there. And we've all heard about hallucinations and things like that. And I know the tech gets better and better every day, but I think there's always going to need to be some oversight and some refinement and hopefully expertise involved in ensuring that what's going out to the business or what's going out to those stakeholders is the truth.
Yeah, what I find refreshing about your perspective, and I'm talking to many CX leaders, is that they typically go into the actual customer-facing reality. So thinking about how to personalize, right, and to get the next best action in place for the customer. But the things you're talking about are way more about making the business better aligned with what the customer needs and trying to rally the teams together using the customer as the centerpiece to align on. So I think that's a fascinating perspective. And I believe so too, that is actually the first place where AI will be better and helpful, because we're still scared to let it loose on the customer, and we'd rather test it on ourselves. And, if we miss a couple of points in the analysis, like, no one will get hurt. But if we are acting as a robot on our behalf towards the customer, well, that can be a PR disaster in some cases. So I think
service design is going to be incredibly critical in all of this. Understanding what kind of service your customers need and how to design around that with AI. But that is just one piece of this larger puzzle. It's rare to have a chief customer officer who's only thinking about the servicing piece, I think. And so, yeah, designing that to, again, true back to your CX principles, and to ensure that virtuous cycle of what we're learning through the service experience gets back to the rest of the business as well. That is going to require creativity and new tools, to your point.
On that note, Trish, thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to reach out to you, learn more on how to build these highly effective teams or creating inside business partners, what's the best place to find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, and they can also find me over at the Mid-Atlantic CX Forum.
Wonderful. We're going to put links in the show notes to you. And I want to thank you again for being such a wonderful chief customer officer, showing the way forward. Thank you, Trish.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.